One of our last adventures before COVID hit was to the stunning region of Chile. And that's where we met today's guest winemaker, Sven Brookfeld of POLKURA.
POLKURA means yellow stones, and they were very much in evidence when we toured his vineyard just 30 miles from the Pacific Ocean.
Cheers.
Let me pour my wine. I just poured the bottle.
yeah,
It's still closed. You're so much faster than me.
Are you opening Secano as well?
No, I'm opening Malbec tonight, even though Syrah is our main variety. I wanted to open the Malbec. I hadn't opened this in a while, meaning a few weeks. Cheers.
Cheers. Nice to see you again.
So good to see you again.
And thank you for taking the time. It's such a busy time for you.
Yeah.
Well, but on the weekend it always works, and I'm in Santiago now. I'll be moving down to the winery during the week and see how things are going. So with the harvest, we will start with with one Syrah parcel, probably Monday or Tuesday, tomorrow or the day after. And we already picked Merlot. Merlot is usually not part of our main focus, but we have a small Merlot parcel as well. So that's how things are going. I think it's going to be I'm really hoping for a great vintage 2021 for two reasons. But the main reason being it has been a really cool summer. We haven't had extreme temperatures, so the whole ripening process has been just happening slower. And everybody is desperate, saying it's too slow. I'm like, no, that's just fine. When it is too quick or too warm, results are usually not as, they're always good, but this is just more exciting.
So tell us then, would middle of March be considered a late harvest in Chile, in your part of the world?
No, that's usually when most harvest time usually starts in February with whites and warm areas. I reckon this year is 2 weeks late. Right. So last year, which was a very warm vintage, we started in February with reds actually, and this year we started the first or the second week of March. So we're really 2-3 weeks behind a warm vintage.
Right.
And so now, more than late, it's the fact that things ripen slower. And we would probably have, the early ripening varieties or the earlier ripening varieties like Syrah or Malbec, those will be just fine. Maybe there's going to be some concern in Chile. I don't have Carmener, but Carmener might be something that gets into trouble if we have to pick it like in May or something, May or June, and then if it starts raining, we will see. But for us, as long as the weather stays dry, I'm super positive about 2021.
Excellent. Well, finally, so good to hear someone with something very positive to say about 2021.
Hey, we have vaccines in Chile, and we will have a great vintage.
Awesome.
So great news. My wife got her vaccine 3 weeks ago. She's a teacher, so she has better priority, and it was super exciting. And me too. On Friday, I was all emotional and great moment, and it was super exciting.
I'll never forget meeting you last year and I can never pronounce that restaurant, Pinpilinpausha.
You got it.
But what a great restaurant. What a great meal we all had. And it was just fascinating listening to you talk about all things wine and about Movi and about, it was a wonderful time. And we'll look forward to doing that all over again as soon as we can get back down to your neck of the woods.
We are waiting for you.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend.
And speaking of Movi, that was one of the things that we really wanted to talk to you about, because that was new information for us. We certainly knew that a lot of the production in Chile has typically been, I think it's 4 or 5 main producers in terms of production, and that you started this Movi, which is, I don't know if the English translation is correct, but the movement of independent vintners.
Correct.
And I think it would be really great for our subscribers and our audience to hear more about that and what you're doing with it, because I've been noticing on your social media channels that you're starting to get a lot more attention about it as well.
Exactly. Movi started in 2009. It was June 2009, so almost 12 years now. Chile is known for its large industry. Chile is top, it always changes, but it's top 10, top 5, top 6 in terms of wine production worldwide. But Chile has by far, the largest average winery size of the world. So there are very few big players in Chile. And that's what everybody knows. And those are the wineries that get to Canada and to the rest of the world, mostly in the stores and restaurants and where you find wines. And the family-owned or just small winery was unknown in Chile, and not just unknown, but didn't exist really. There are tons of small growers, but most of them sell their grapes to the big wineries. And I realized when we started Movi, this was kind of knocking with the head against the door. I always use this word, independentized. I was working for a large winery as a winemaker, and I always had the dream of making my own wine and having my own winery. And actually, I started very, very early, doing it at the same time. I had my job, my daytime job, and this was my nighttime job, working and developing POLKURA. It was always 100% transparent, and I always told my boss, the first boss, I said, listen, we bought this vineyard or this property, and I lied a little bit to him. I wasn't 100% honest. I just said, this is a family thing, and my family bought this property, and I got involved. I didn't say I wanted to actually plant a vineyard and make my own wine, but that was only the first time. And then I switched jobs twice. And it wasn't a lie. I just didn't tell the whole thing. But then the next time when I switched job, the first time I said to my employer, I have this and I will continue doing this, and they said, yeah, that's okay, and I had it in writing. And then the next time I switched, I had it in my contract actually. So I always had this on the side, and I always wanted at some point jump, but then there's never the right moment. And when do you jump? When do you jump into the pool? Especially if you have a good job, well paid, comfortable position, and everything. And so it just happened. I was pushed, and but that was perfect timing. It could not have been any better. It was the best thing that could have happened. My ego was hurt, but that was about it, and that lasted for about 2 weeks. And so you start this, and I said, okay, I'm out here, and 2 very relevant things happened. First, I called Wines of Chile at that time. Their focus today is completely different. Back then, I said, listen, I have this small winery or this project, and I want to be part of Wines of Chile, because, I mean, you don't have any small producers, and I think this is really, really positive for the industry. Do you have a special fee for small producers? No. Okay, bye. Then I called this, and I'm not going to say the name, but it's a very important wine writer. And you will figure it out anyway. So I tell him, hey, listen, I'll be in the US in a couple of weeks, and I had tasted with him several times, showing him the wines from the big wineries and those that pay for advertising and stuff. And so I tell him, listen, I have my own project now, and now I'll be in the US in a couple of weeks. Can we meet? And I would love to show you my wines. How many wines do you have? Just 2 wines. It's going to be 15 minutes max. Oh, no, sorry. I don't do meetings for 2 wines. That's not a good use of my time. Okay. Okay, well, fine. And then I meet someone else in Chile that had the same problem of not having enough volume and not being relevant. And we said, listen, let's call friends. Let's call people making wine and see what they think. And we started calling. He called his friends, I called my friends, and we started meeting. We had no idea what we wanted to do. Not long ago, we were putting out, how do you say, when the notes from the meetings. I found the notes from 10 years back and or 12 years back, and things that we were saying, and we have to do this, and we have to do that, and we have to call this person, and we need a name, and we need rules, and maybe we should use these rules or those rules, and it's all in writing. And it was super fun to find those notes. And so we met 2-3 times, and we came up with the concept of MOVI, the Movement of Independent Vintners. And we were 12 members back then. We're 35 today, and it really switched the way the world perceived Chile. For Chile, it was kind of a menace, because we were, the first time we showed up, it was this wine show, very conservative wine show, white tablecloth, classical music, maybe jazz, everybody in white shirts. And I mean, Chile is rather conservative if you compare it to other countries. Dead boring. All the wines are the same. And we got the manager of the show kind of thought that we were doing something cool, and so she got us a separate room, and we had a rock band, black tablecloth, and super loud music, and we were right next to the super premium wines, and it was a mess in good terms. It was so much fun. We had a wine party, and of course everybody felt threatened and saying, "What? I mean, they're destroying the image of Chile," and that has changed completely. Today, that was kind of the tip of the arrow. Today, there are several other groups and even independent winemakers that do have the access now to the international wine scene, because MOVI kind of opened that door. It showed that Chile can also make wine in small scale, human scale, just expressing one concept, one project, one terroir, or a winemaker, or a dream, or a style, or whatever. So the diversity of Chile really increased with MOVI. And I have to tell you the end of the story. I called the same guy again, the same wine critic, and 1 year later. And I tell him, listen, I know you don't do 2 wines. We have MOVI. At that, we have 15 different wines. Would you be interested in tasting MOVI? He said, yeah, absolutely, come over. So I felt, I mean, yes, he wasn't very nice. He was actually rather rude the first time, but I felt that the fact of being together just added power to the same wines that we were offering independently. None of the others actually could call this guy direct. I had the number, none of the others had. So it's not just the fact of showing another Chile, it's also the fact of doing things together as a group, having access as a group to things that nobody would have access independently. That's one thing. With one critic, we're super good terms now with that guy is actually gone. We're in super good terms with that publication today. And wine fairs. I couldn't afford a wine fair myself, but we rent space in Europe, in Germany, all movie members that want to go, we all rent space together and we share costs. And it comes down to nothing, literally nothing. So we have access to buyers and to be in a fair just for the fact of being together. So it's a super exciting thing, and I'm extremely happy how it worked. I wouldn't have dreamed to see Movi where it is today 10 years ago.
That's phenomenal. And I think also the timing, as you say, because I think so many more people are becoming a little bit more, not necessarily sophisticated, because I don't want that word to sound the wine snob, but wanting to know where their wines come from and being more interested in what's in the glass.
Yes.
And so I think that you guys being independent and really expressing a specific terroir, people want that story now, right?
And it's not just the story. The beauty of wine is sometimes it's just a story, but the beauty of wine is that most of the times there's actually something behind that story, and that makes the whole thing come together. Wine is one of the few, if not the only produce, which is still completely atomized or split in terms of the selection that you have. You walk into any store and you have thousands, hundreds or thousands, depending where you are, of options. There's no other produce. And I like the word produce because this is agriculture. There's no other produce that has the selection of wine. Everything is merging, coming together. How many ketchup brands do you know? 5, 6 maybe? Or mayonnaise, 10, 12, olive oil. Beer is actually, you have a good selection of beer too. But wine, every wine has an audience. Every wine has something to say. Not every wine, but there's something behind every bottle in the end.
Yeah. Well, and certainly the really good wines, and I can tell you this 2016 Secano is among the really good ones, definitely has something to say. And one of the things that we've discovered, and I think that this is, common with a lot of our readers as well too, is that we're looking for site-specific wines that can tell us the story of a specific place. And if your winery is so big that your site is the country of Chile or California or France or something like that, if you're that big, you're not site specific, and you're telling the story of a much larger place. And what we often find is very interesting, is to find the small artisanal producers like you, Sven, and the people that you've associated with, because you're telling a very specific story. You're telling about your beautiful hillside vineyard just 30 miles from the ocean. And what we saw was a whole bunch of different terroirs right within one vineyard. I can still picture it in my mind, the slopes coming to meet each other, and, they're not all uniformly facing the same direction. And it's very different up on the hillside than it is down at that flat at the bottom. And it's interesting to get that site-specific story.
Yes, but I have to disagree on one thing. Small producers usually get to be site-specific. But that doesn't mean big wineries are not. It's always like easy. It's an easy word just to go out and say, oh no, we're better because we're small, or different because we're small. Big wineries do have access to the best sites as well. And if they are able to manage those spots properly, they can make site-specific and great wines as well. And I think one needs to be very fair in terms of not kind of saying, oh no, the big wineries, they just throw everything in. No, they don't. I mean, some do, but not everybody. And there are great wines made by big wineries. I think, as an example, Conchitoro makes the best wines of Chile, but they also make the most massive wines of Chile at the same time. Their focus is not the high end, but they do have the most beautiful Cabernet vineyards in the Maipo Valley, and they are able to actually keep those separate and make wines like Don Melchor or Almaviva or Gravas del Maipo, and so on. And the same happens with Santa Rita and with other wineries.
No, and that's a very good point. We did go to Concha y Toro and Santa Rita Hills. So, and that was something, it was just that they have the different tiers. Like you said, a lot of the mass produced is largely what gets to us up here. We can get Don Melchor and we can get Almaviva, but for the most part, we get the mass produced stuff. So it's your point is very valid. And we learned that as well, that the big houses, as much as they make the mass production, they do have their specialty wines, which are stunning for sure.
Yeah, no, correct point, and very fair of you to point that out as well too, as a small producer. So maybe you could tell us a bit about your farming techniques. You know, how difficult your land is, yet you make these beautiful wines from it. Can you tell us what goes on your land?
Well, I have two things that I find most important. One is soil, and this is nothing new. Every winemaker will talk about soil and rocks and granite and so on. And the second aspect is sun exposure, which is not exactly that uncommon either. But I take sun exposure to an extreme because I hate the sun. And we have way too much sun in this country. So you could have asked me, why don't you go further south where it is cooler? Yes, good question. But I like everything. I want full-bodied wines that are elegant and not over-extracted and not jammy. But you need the heat for full body. But I don't like the flavors that you get from, I'm talking general, the flavors that you normally get from warm areas, from sun-exposed areas, I don't like that much. So soil is crucial, and having heat, but the less possible at the same time is crucial too. So we have to mix all this thing together. Very quickly about the soil. Soil is important, but at the end it's boring. We have, and I try to keep it simple when I explain soils. Rocks usually give the flavor, and it's not that the rocks or the minerals from the rock actually enter the roots. It's just the balance, the equilibrium that happens within the soil, and what the roots can actually extract from the soil that makes the flavors happen. Granite is the key element at POLKURA. The more granitic the soil, the more mineral the wine tastes. And then clay is what allows the wine to have the structure and body. So much for the soil. We have different combinations of compositions, of clay and granite, and depending on how big the granite is, we have bigger stones or more decomposed granite. That's what actually that's the fine tuning of the. You mentioned we have all those different terroirs, and that's what makes the different soils. And then the same happens with the clay. You have brown clay, you have red clay. I do like red clay much better than brown clay, and we're able to actually separate those things. Now we have a new wine you have not tasted, and so that's another reason for you to come back, which comes primarily from red clay pockets from the south-facing sections of the vineyard. And I now just introduced the next topic, which is the exposure to the sun. So in the southern hemisphere, the sun comes from the other side, and it comes from the north. So north-facing vineyards are warmer than south-facing vineyards, and our best wines, or the wines I find more interesting, it's not best. The wines I just appeal more are the ones coming from southern slopes, because we have less sun. Now, there's nothing new about that in general. If you go to any hillside in Europe or in North America, they will tell you the differences between northern slopes and southern slopes. And if you're in a cool area, you of course have to go to the more sun-exposed and slope and so on. But in Chile, south-facing is cooler. And that's where I get my most interesting wines. So we have less direct sunlight at the south-facing slopes, but that's not enough. I also planted the whole vineyard, and this I learned in Chile. There's still tons of furrow irrigation, and if you just irrigate with canals or with furrows or just with superficial water, you just cannot run your vineyard anywhere you want. You have to go at the pace of the slope, because the water has to run along that vineyard. So it's not just I want to plant north-south, but if the slope goes east-west, then you cannot plant north-south, you have to plant east-west. Maybe north-south is better, but you cannot do it because the water comes from the other side. That's the advantage of drip irrigation. But there's still tons of these vineyards planted in furrow, and I had this 20-hectare, one single type of soil, very uncommon. One type of soil, carmenated was, and it wasn't 100% flat, so the different rows had to go according to the slope for irrigation. And by far, the one I liked the most, exactly the same soil, but the only difference was the row direction. The most interesting one was the one that was like 30 degrees northwest, planted the rows in order for the sun to come from the top of the to shine on the top of the row when it was the warmest, and the berries on the side were in shade. And I said, listen, if you plant north-south at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun will hit from the side. If you plant east-west, the sun will actually shine on the on one side of the row on the canopy the whole day, and the other one will be shaded the whole day. You can actually harvest those things separate, and we did all those things, but the best was always the one that was in 30 degrees northwest. And I said, I will plant my vineyard 30 degrees northwest, no matter the slope, because we have drip irrigation. I have to admit, I would not do that again. If you have a slope, 40% slope, that's what we have on the POLKURA hill, and you just go diagonal with the slope, the only way you can manage that vineyard is by hand. There's no way a tractor can go up and down because it would tip over. The other reason why I'm not doing it again is because we have decided not to plant the rest of the hill. We decided to keep the rest of the hill, which is probably the site for the best wines in the future. We will leave 20 hectares as a conservation area, and we're not planting that at all. So basically, those are the three things that we do. It's soil, sun exposure, and then the row orientation. I mentioned everything is done by hand. We're not organic. We do traditional farming. I don't believe organic, and I have no problem with this. It's actually better for the environment, and it's not better for the wine. It's not better for health, but we're very responsible and sustainable at the same time.
We know that you're one to take on challenges and succeed with those challenges, Sven, because in our glass right now is the Syrah that you dry farm. So no irrigation, no drip, no furrow, nothing. That's a hell of a challenge to take on where you're at. Your vineyard is beautiful, but it's very much a dry climate. And, I wouldn't have thought you could grow anything, just looking at it without some sort of assistance from irrigation. But you've made this beautiful Syrah. So maybe tell us more about Secano and dry farming and all that you've been doing in that regard.
Yes. Well, in fact, we started. I have a scientific background, and you learn modern agriculture, modern viticulture. You go to school, you take all these irrigation courses, and you're very efficient with the use of water and all that. And we started like that. We actually, in the very beginning, we had to bore 2 wells, and those wells actually worked for a while. And the POLKURA vineyard was planted 18 years ago. And after 3 years, we started noticing that the water table was going down and down and down and down and down. And I was, okay, it went down a little bit, but it's going to be stable now. This was just one time. And then it stayed the same for 2 or 3 years, and then it went down again. And it was always dropping half. It wasn't actually like a little bit every year. I have no explanation for this. So we had, and I will give you the numbers. It went from 30 liters per second to 15 liters per second. From 15, it didn't go down half. From 15, it went down to 9, and we stayed at 9 for a while. It went down to 7, to 5, to 3, to 1, and we're at 1 now. So we have lost more than 90% of the available water from underground. We figured this would be a problem. We knew when we started POLKURA that water was a problem. I did not imagine it would be this quick and this much of a problem. Very early, we started finding or searching for solutions and working on the water issue. And we have done many, many things, very successful things. And basically 3, and I will talk about dry farming at the end. The first thing you do, of course, is accumulating water. In the beginning, we had more water than we needed. So we were just pumping right out of the well into the vineyard. As we noticed that would be problematic in the future, we built a reservoir. So we could pump water into the reservoir during the winter when you're not using the water. We pump into the reservoir, and then we have the reservoir plus the wells in the summer. Then we bought water rights on the surface. Like we have two little creeks that come down when it rains. And only if it rains in the winter, those creeks are actually full with water. The rest of the year, they're dry. So we do have water rights on those creeks to fill the reservoir. Then with irrigation, we introduced a irrigating technique that basically uses 50% of the water. Now you think drip irrigation is already efficient. We use half of that. It's called partial root drying. What you do is you need 2 parallel irrigation systems, and you only actually irrigate 50% of the vine and keep the other side dry. The dry side, the dry roots, tell the plant we are in trouble, and the plant shuts. But at the same time, the plant is getting water from the wet side. After 2 weeks, I'm not a plant psychologist, but this works. After 2 weeks, the plant realizes that, hey, you're messing with me, and it opens again. Then you switch. You irrigate the dry side, and you dry the wet side, and it starts all over again. The seed plants are stupid in the end. For the irrigation, we had to rip out 7 hectares. I decided to rip out 7 hectares of Cabernet Sauvignon that were very unproductive, very low yield, very nice quality, but I mean, somebody has to pay the bill. So, well, and then the final solution is the most obvious and the most simple one, dry farming. See, the only problem is that nobody had done it in the area, and which is not true either. I figured out later, but nobody had done it from day one, and not with Syrah. That is for sure. And we started researching who has done dry farming from day one with 300 millimeters of rainfall in the winter only. Where can I learn? And we only found vineyards in Spain, in La Mancha actually, and they had started a dry farming program, and I had access to their results through our consultant. And so we basically kind of copied what they had done, which wasn't rocket science. It's just bush vines one by one, spaced 2 meters apart, and we used drought-resistant rootstocks. We planted, we irrigated with buckets or a hose the first year only, and let them go. We had picked, we actually dug like, I don't know how many soil pits to find the best soil to do this. And we were looking for the best combination of clay and sand, because clay holds the water. Yeah. You cannot dry farm on sand. You cannot dry farm on hillsides. On hillsides, the water runs off. On sand, the water just runs down, so it doesn't stay in the soil. So you need a combination, and clay holds the water. If the soil is 100% clay, it doesn't actually let the roots extract the water. So in 100% clay, it doesn't work. You need a combination of clay and sand. So we make this wine 2013. The result was horrible, undrinkable, terrible. I mean, I'm literally, but I was happy. We made wine. So I blended, we kept 2 barrels, one Grenache and one Syrah. And I blended everything else away in the press wine, and ciao, it doesn't matter. I was very humble. I said, listen, I need to learn. This is like the way viticulture was made thousands of years ago. I went to university. I didn't learn this. We're doing something wrong, or maybe not, whatever. So I go back to the winery. This was months later. I pull up the bung. I taste the wine. I said, "Ooh, what's this? What this is the dry farm, the Sagano?" I'm like, "No, it's not." Well, you put the bung in yourself. This is the wine. I'm like, come on, you can tell me. I've screwed up 1,000 times. Every possible mistake that can happen in a winery, I've been responsible. So if you blended the wine, if you whatever, what happened? What is this? Well, that was 2013. And I was so excited. I said, "Ah, what do we do next?" and then you start moving. And I said, "Okay, I'll call my partner, Gonzalo. We have to do something with this wine." And I'm like, "What do you want to do?" I'm like, "I don't know. We have to bottle it." "Okay, let's bottle it." So I bottle it, and we didn't have a name, nothing. And you will like this part of the story. I never, ever do I show my wines to someone without knowing what I am doing. So I take this wine with no label, and I start showing it to journalists and to friends, because it was so different. It was another style, another wine, nothing. It had nothing to do with our other POLKURAs. And so I had decided that I wanted to show this, but I said, "Listen, I'm just going to use it to talk about." And so then, of course, after a few weeks, I said, "Oh, we will have to sell it," but we still didn't have a name. And Anthony Gismondi tastes the wine, and I said, "Listen, I still don't know what the name will be." And I had just a tape, not even a label. It was a paper tape on the bottle, and it said Sagano. Why don't you just call it Sagano?
Good Canadian.
So that's his contribution. Okay, Sagano. Let's leave it. Sagano means dry farming, or it's actually an area with no irrigation. And then the label was designed by my partner's daughter. She was 16 years old back then. She's actually studying graphic design now, and it has worked tremendously well. I'm extremely happy with this. And we found a very old Cabernet vineyard in 2018. We didn't find it. It was always there. 200 years, a vineyard, 200 years. I don't think the vines are, the vines are not 200 years old, but they're very old. But the vineyard has been there for 200 or more years. And we actually had access to those grapes. They make just jug wine with that. And I told them, "Can we have like a ton or something just to see?" And we made that wine. We made that Cabernet 2018 and 2019. And even though it is Cabernet, it has exactly the same fruity, melon, peachy nose that the Secano has, which you would never relate to a red wine. And for me, that was just, I'm so happy we had the opportunity to make that wine, because I learned what terroir means after 25 years. A flavor that doesn't exist anywhere else in red wine exists in that area with no intervention, and it gets lost when you irrigate. And that I find absolutely fascinating.
So, well, we're so glad that you did decide to carry on with this experiment, because, Sven, we're really digging this wine. This is a delicious Syrah. It's got, it's got some of the things that you were describing that you love in a wine earlier on. It's got that elegance, but there's still great texture in this wine. It's powerful and elegant at the same time. And to me, it's got great complexity too. And this is not an old wine. This is, 2016 vintage. We're only 5 years after the vintage. Yet there's lots going on in the glass. There's a great minerality to it, sort of on the cusp of red fruit and black fruit. Delicious wine, as all your POLKURAs are. But this one, I think, is really one that you can be very proud of. And I hope that your farm continues to allow those grapes to grow each year, because, and I know that with no water coming onto the land, that's going to be a challenge. But this is a beautiful wine.
It really is.
We have expanded the project. We have now 5 hectares. We planted 3 more hectares of dry farm, dry farmed vines, and they're all doing great. So we have the crop is super low, but we are expanding, and again it's so. I just purchased vines to replace like dead vines in the irrigated vineyard, but it will. I mean, if for example, if we don't have enough water this winter, I'll just plant them dry farmed. If I'm not able to, and that's cool. It makes decisions so much easier, because you buy new plants, but you don't know if you will be able to actually use them, because if you don't have enough water to irrigate, it's a very bad idea to plant a new vineyard that particular year. So we just go.
Sven, are you planning to plant any other varieties that you haven't worked with yet, or are you sticking with what you've got?
I am. You'd never ask a winemaker that.
I know.
I'm planning so many things. One of the varieties I'm super interested in is Grenache Blanc, and we need our own white wine. I make Sauvignon Blanc from purchased grapes, not from the POLKURA hill, and that's our white wine. That sounds a bit corporate. Like, I need a red wine and a white wine, so I buy the grapes for the white wine, and it's Sauvignon Blanc from Leda, super commercial. Hey, we have to make a living too. But then I haven't figured out the POLKURA white wine, and I thought it would be Viognier, and that was a mistake as a white wine, because I have never liked Viognier. And now that I make my own Viognier, I confirmed that I don't like Viognier.
Fair enough.
And so I'm not going to bottle. We have, and it's sitting in the barrels. It's turning orange. And what I'm doing now is that I'm actually sending samples. Every time I get a request for an orange wine, which I have to say I dislike as well, but hey, that's good. I mean, if I'm able to sell that Viognier as an orange wine, that would be super fun. But it's 100 cases. It's nothing.
Yeah.
So basically, the Viognier we use when it ripens together with the Syrah. It's a great complement for the Syrah as a co-fermenter. It adds perfume to the Syrah and so on, as grapes, not as wine. But then there is no Grenache Blanc in Chile, and I've always liked the variety, and there are no vines available. And the nursery, I get my vines from actually imported Grenache Blanc, and every year they say they will have some available, but they haven't focused in reproducing it because, I mean, they're more focused on their commercial stuff, and they have like 3 mother plants or something, and it's going to take a while until they actually reproduce. 3 plants will give you, I don't know how many, 100, 200 buds, and I'm happy with that. If I get 100 buds, I plant them.
Blanc fan, so you have to keep us posted, because I as soon as you said that, I was like, I didn't know Chile made Grenache Blanc.
No, there's no Grenache Blanc here. It doesn't exist. And more varieties. It's more developing what we already have. We have this blend called GSM plus T, which is basically, well, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre, and Tempranillo. And within that, when the Tempranillo turns out well, when the Tempranillo is not eaten by birds and foxes, which happens every other year, it's like Pinot. See, for some reason, Pinot growers always complain about birds. And I have the Tempranillo and the Grenache planted together, one spot. They eat half the vineyard. They only eat the Tempranillo. They don't touch the Grenache. It's amazing. And maybe someday developing the Tempranillo into something would be something interesting. But I make like 6 or 7 different types of Syrah, and I said, okay, this is it. I don't think there's going to be another one. And then we have another one. I think I found every interesting corner.
Well, when you find the next one, we'll send you this interview again and remind you.
Yeah. By the way, we tasted your GSM plus T when we were down at POLKURA. It is a fantastic wine. And I thought it was genius to add the Tempranillo to it. It was just a really terrific wine.
I'm not going to make just GSM. That's that's so commercial. Everybody makes GSM.
And you said that you were doing bush vine, so no trellis. Just are these sort of goblets, or tell us?
Yeah, exactly. It's a vase, a gobelet, and basically Syrah is super soft. So I didn't want the vines to be on the ground, because Syrah doesn't grow up; it grows down. So I have a little trunk. And then we have a pole, and I tie the shoots, the Syrah shoots, to the pole, so it stays up a little. It is easier for picking. It is easier for managing. It's tidier, and so on.
So, and those vines, their roots would now be, well, they're in their 10th season, I think. So they would have gained a fair amount of depth by now. And is there a better chance of survival? Is there more water as they go deeper in the clay? Does that
I've bulldozed the vineyard, bulldozing, like just shoveling, and we went as deep as possible with the shovel, and there were roots there.
Oh, wow.
So maybe I'm not going to bring a bigger one. It's too expensive, but we have enough depth. So it's at least 2 meters of roots, and I don't know, maybe more.
The little bus that took us up the hill, the little truck.
The POLKURA mobile.
The POLKURA mobile, yeah. I trust that's still there?
Of course. It's called Flower Power.
Flower Power.
Yeah, it's a good story too. That used to be my camper van. It was super slow, 80 kilometers per hour, loaded 65 to 70. And so we tried to get very far, and it took us weeks to get where we wanted to go, 4x4. And so I asked my family at one point, and I thought I would have a little bit of support, but it was like zero. Do you want to keep it? My son is very adventurous. And he said, no. And nobody wanted to keep it. I'm like, you're going to be kidding. Who's going to build the tent? And they said, I built the tent. Get rid of that truck.
Can't imagine why they didn't want to keep it.
Yeah. I don't understand either. So in the end, we decided to convert it into a vineyard truck, and this was inspired by a trip we did to Uruguay, to Cabo Polonio, and this is a national park on the beach, and you just park at the gate of the park, and then they take you in these huge military trucks, a bit like safari trucks, loaded with people on the roof and inside through the beach. And I said, listen, we will convert this truck into that. And now our camper van converted into the vineyard truck, and we have seats on the roof, and you can actually...
I sat on the roof. I have to tell you, that view is fantastic.
It's just so in keeping, Sven, with you and with POLKURA. I mean, that's definitely the personality of the winery. You know, it's a lot of fun when you get up to, you know, as the POLKURA mobile finally makes it up to the top of the hill, and you get that spectacular view. And then, of course, down at the bottom where the winery is, you've got your clay amphoras outside where they've all been painted. You know, you've had the local artists paint whatever it was they're going to paint on them, and they're just beautiful. And what it does is it imparts a great sense of fun about you and about your winery. And I mean, even though these are extremely serious wines, I love the sense of fun that goes on with POLKURA.
I do like that you point that out, because that's exactly what we want to transmit with the wine. It's fun.
Well, we could, I feel like we could talk to you forever, and there's so many things we haven't touched on, but we are running out of time. But we do finish with some rapid fire questions for you that we ask every winemaker, just because it's fun. So you can answer these as little or as long as you want. But what was the wine that made you want to become a winemaker?
No, there was not a specific wine. What I can tell you, that the first time I went to a wine fair, I was already interested in wine, but I had never tasted good quality wine. I had never been to a wine tasting. And I go to this wine fair, and I was able to differentiate between entry level and premium with my tongue. And that made the click.
I think I know the answer to the second one, or maybe could take a guess based on what you make, but what is your favorite grape variety to work with?
Riesling.
Oh, really?
That is my best kept secret. I had the opportunity to work in Germany, and for me, Riesling is the same as Syrah in the way that no matter where you plant Riesling, it will scream out where it comes from. And that's what I like about Syrah as well.
What's your everyday go-to pizza or empanada wine? What's your just everydayer that you love to drink just on a regular basis?
Well, it's more for the empanada wine. That would be more Grenache. A good version of País. País is the same as the Mission Grape, but it needs to be a good version because there's lots of crap. And more the fruity, lighter wine for that kind of dish.
Last question: what is the most memorable wine you've ever had?
DRC. This was October. This was October 1998. See, I jumped at the answer. It was the moment.
Yeah,
and I've had many moments like that, but that was like you said, the one. That was the one.
Well, just so you know, this wine is very memorable to us because we sat in your quincho, in your property, drinking this, and it's so much fun to open this again, talk to you again. Just a year and a bit later. Who knew what was going to happen the last year? And just, it's phenomenal. And it's just a wonderful memory for us. Yeah. And we just so appreciate you taking the time today.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Sven. Great to reconnect with you. Glad to see you and see you looking so well. And we do look forward until the next time.
I look forward to having you back. I hope I'm in Canada soon. And it's a great honor, especially that you opened that bottle of Secano in Canada today, and that you're enjoying it. And I had great fun